So I built a flip-up tool storage cabinet. Let me show you how it works. Real simple, quick, and it's built with off-the-shelf hardware. Let me show you how I made it. This is part 4 of my modular mobile workshop workbench cubes, and this one I'm going to show you how to make it into a flip top. All these videos are based off of the same cabinet or workshop cube, so if you need more detail on how to build the cube itself, see part 1 in this series. I'll put a link down below, but I'm just going to show you in this one how to build the flip up part of it. These are the casters that I'm going to be using for this cabinet. And what's really nice about these, as you screw this orange part here, this foot comes down and it becomes solid. So it can roll around on the wheel, put it where you want it, and then turn these orange things, and it's going to be just as solid as if it was sitting on feet. A lot easier option than messing around with some kind of movable base. The first step in building the flip-up mechanism is mounting some hinges to the shelf that you're going to mount the tool to, and to a block of wood that's going to get screwed to the back of the cabinet. I'm using hinges here for my door, and I'm using those because I'm putting a planer on my shelf and it's really heavy. And even if you're using a lighter tool, I don't think using utility hinges is a good idea here. And you'll notice here that this hinge has a gap because of the barrel of the hinge. You want to route out or chisel out a little slot in the wood for the hinge to set in so it can sit flush against the wood. It's just going to make it a little more stable. If you don't get rid of that little space there, the hinge is going to be more likely to bend. And here I'm using a centering bit to pre-drill some holes into the shelf. It's just going to make it a lot easier when I go to put this in the cabinet. These centering bits are great because you don't have to worry about getting the screws perfectly centered in the hole of the hinge. The bit automatically centers it. These chain bolt latches are the key to this flip-up station working. They're meant for barn doors where you mount them at the top of the door and the chain hangs down, you pull on it. But I'll show you how we're going to mount these so it's going to work for a flip-up. You need to put a notch on the front of the shelf that's going to flip up, and this is where the latch is going to mount. You also need to be aware of where your hinges are and if this flip-up shelf is going to hit your hinges. So I think I made this about 5 inches by 1 inch. Next, you want to take your chain bolt latch and put it on the bottom of the shelf with the slope facing up. And I started out with putting the slope right at the edge of where the notch is. This ended up needing to be adjusted later, and you'll be able to see that when I get to that part. But this is what's going to catch onto the other part of the latch on the side of the cabinet when you pull the shelf up. Next, you want to take the chain from one of the latches and feed it through a piece of hose and put it on the hook for the other latch. And that's going to act as the handle. The rubber hose will be a handle that will release the latches. And these chain bolts come apart pretty easily. You just to take them apart or put them together, you just push down on them. The shaft will stick out and you can put the hook on. And just put them in position where you want them and screw them down to the shelf. And here you can see how the release mechanism is going to work when they're both connected together. You just pull on that rubber hose and it's going to actuate both of the chain bolts at one time, and that will allow the shelf to quickly and easily go down. Next, you want to cut 2 blocks of wood. The dimensions aren't that critical. And these are going to be used to help support these metal brackets that come in the hardware for these chain bolts. And again, make sure you pre-drill these so they're not going to split apart. And I'm using that centering bit again just to make it easier to align everything up. Once you have your latch mechanism all set up, you can take your hinges and screw those to the bottom of the shelf. To prep for mounting the shelf into your cabinet, you need to make a line a certain distance down. I can't tell you what that distance is going to be because it's going to depend on your tool and how high you want it to be above the work surface. Just when you make this line, make sure you account for the thickness of the top and whatever cabinets you may have on either side of this cabinet that you're putting the flip up in, and just mark your line. And remember, the shelf that the tool sits on is going to be above this, so it's going to be another 3/4 of an inch higher than the line that you draw. Next, I put a clamp on the side of the cabinet to hold the shelf where I wanted it, and then I just put the chain bolt catch in place and traced around where it needed to go. That way I could screw it to the cabinet. There's not really an easy way of getting in there with a screw gun or a screwdriver with the shelf in the way, so I just marked it, let it down, and screwed it in place. And I decided to take them back off and just use a Forstner bit to make a little recess for those T-nuts so these blocks would sit flush. Once I got my planer set up on the shelf to drill the holes, I realized that the hole for my planer to mount it to the shelf was going to hit the chain bolt down below, so I needed to come up with a way to resolve that. And I also didn't like how far out the catch was sticking on the chain bolts. It was barely catching on the brackets on the side. So I'm going to move the chain bolts out slightly so that the catch will go further into those metal brackets on either side. I took the chain bolt off and I drilled a countersunk hole, and I'm going to use these 5/16 panhead bolts and screw them in from the bottom, and I'll use this to mount the planer. It's much better than reworking the whole mechanism, and I can just bolt the planer down to these bolts. And then I also move the chain bolts out slightly just so they'll stick into the catch a little bit further. I'm really happy with the way this turned out. I'm so happy with it, in fact, I built a few others. I made one with doors and adjustable shelves. I built one with drawers. I made one into a router table. And since these are square, you can put them together side by side or back to back. They still move around plenty easily enough. You can make an L shape if you want. Or you can put them together straight in a line, which is what I'm going to do. You could still roll them, but it's getting heavy. I really appreciate you taking the time to stop and watch my video. Hopefully you got some ideas from it. Maybe you'll build some of these cubes or something like it. And make sure you hit that subscribe button to see what I come up with next. Thanks for watching. My modular mobile workshop workbench series. I forgot to say cubes.